All right, guys, the first and most basic exercise we could do to improve acceleration is just a sled march. What we're gonna do here is we're gonna focus on shin angle, torso angle, and pushing through the hip. This is fully a push movement. There's not a lot of power behind it. It's more about strength and force production. We're also gonna try to start getting some of that ankle stiffness by not allowing that ankle to drop as we push through, but keeping a very good angle all the way through. Your shin and your torso angle should match all the way through this exercise. Watch as we execute this here with our athlete. Notice the thigh comes forward and back. When we talk about accelerating and low heel recovery, this is what we're talking about. Notice the hips always through on every single step. So again, hip is gonna get through. We're squeezing with the glutes and the quads on every step as the ankle's nice and stiff. You can tell an athlete is doing this wrong if they bend at the waist and now there's just not a lot of power through the hip. We're limiting how much force we can produce. If we get the hip through, all of a sudden that power comes right back and we have nice, long, strong strides. The next progression after a sled march is gonna be a sled bound. We're gonna take the same strength and the same movement pattern that we built during our marches and we're gonna turn it into a powerful movement now in a bound. The ankle's still gonna be stiff. There's not gonna be a lot of give at the ankle. The shin angles, torso angles remain the same, and we're still pushing through the hip so we're not bending down and back at the hip. Watch our athlete here as he jumps from one leg to the other. So once again, our movement is gonna be exactly the same as our march, except we're producing force and power into the ground now instead of just walking step by step. We're jumping step by step purposely and with a lot of intent. Go ahead and give me one more. And we're just gonna jump. Hips are through, shin angle matches torso angle, and we're driving. All right, guys, the next drill for acceleration basis is gonna be our sled sprints. Notice instead of pushing it, we're now towing the sled. The athlete's gonna get in a very aggressive angle. The shin angle, torso angle, and hip projection is gonna be the same. We're gonna speed it up from the jumps on the bound to an actual sprint motion now. Let's watch our athlete get into position here. There's going to be tension on the chain from the beginning. We wanna make sure if this could be a rope, by the way, it does not have to be a chain. And obviously there's gonna be sufficient weight to give you feedback. Once you're set up here, notice the shin is already at a good angle, the hip is locked and loaded, and the athlete's ready to push. From there, they are going to sprint as hard and violently as they can, maintaining proper mechanics. So notice once again, we are taking the mechanics and the movement patterns of our sled marches, our sled bounds, and now applying total force and total violence into the ground and turning this into an actual sprint, trying to be as mechanically sound as we can as we do it. Shin angles, hips through, driving back. Okay, guys, the next exercise in our acceleration drill series is the kneeling start. Notice our position start, guys. The knee is gonna be relatively even to the ball of the foot, okay? All the weight's gonna be on that front leg. And what we're trying to do is, since acceleration is such a hip-dominant exercise, we're trying to put the hips at a deficit to really have to push out. Remember, projection, rhythm, and rise. This is when we can really start working on putting all three together into a movement pattern. So athlete's gonna load the hip, shift the weight forward, shin angle's already in attack mode, and he's gonna drive the hip in the torso in the same angle as the shin and accelerate through. Okay, guys, once again, notice the shin angle of attack. Notice the body's steadily rising, and there's not a lot of back kick going on. The feet are recovering low and slowly climbing up. Okay. All right, guys, so all the drills we've done before this point are all kind of development drills to get the tissue used to the stress of sprinting and being aggressive on the ground. It's also a mechanical correction type of drill. Now we're actually gonna start doing the actual sprints. We're gonna put our athlete in a 2-point stance. You could technically put your athlete in a baseball stance as well and get out of these drills, but our athlete's gonna get in a 2-point stance. We're gonna go 10-yard, 20-yard, and 30-yard sprints. Everything up to a 30-yard sprint should basically be an acceleration drill. You have a coach or a partner standing at the different distances and timing it. That's always a great idea. If you're timing the drills, you're seeing progression and you're also getting the most intent out of the athlete. So our athlete's gonna line up on the line. They're gonna load up, and they're gonna sprint as hard as they can for 10 yards in this case. Again, this could be 20 yards. This could be 20 yards, this could be 30 yards. 30 yards is usually about the limit of acceleration. Within that, you wanna see proper mechanics that we've been working on of acceleration. We want to see the body rise, and by the 20, 30-yard mark, we should see more of that transitional, even top-end speed where the body's upright and we're attacking more vertically at that point. All right, guys, obviously we're not track athletes, at least most of us aren't, so part of this is to now engage the body in a way that's going to be relative to your sport. For baseball, it means being able to change direction, go in multiple directions, and still provide the same mechanical advantages of learning how to sprint correctly. So one of the drills we can do is we have a coach stand in front of an athlete, athlete's set in a ready stance, and then the coach will send him, or the partner will send him in one direction or the other. Athlete will react, and the athlete will react to the cues, trying to keep as much mechanical specificity as possible. To make this drill a little bit more challenging, we could put an athlete up on a step, have them drop down and then react, and now they're getting a little bit of that eccentric force development before they're able to change direction and go in the way that the coach points them. So the athlete will drop down, coach will point. Okay guys, so this next module is going to tackle a bunch of drills that we use to create a very explosive and powerful sprinter. These drills are going to specifically target the tissue to be able to produce the right amount of force in the right amount of time that will transfer into some high-end sprinting, some high-end acceleration, etc. The first one is a drop jump. You're basically going to find something that's low enough that you can recover from the ground fast and reactively, but also high enough that's challenging. The athlete's just going to drop straight down, spend as little time on the ground as possible, and jump as high as possible from there. Pretty straightforward. It develops a lot of the eccentric needs of top-end sprinting and a lot of that force production off the midfoot. When the athlete lands on the ground, you're going to notice that the heel doesn't quite hit the ground. It almost hits the ground, but you can slide a credit card right underneath there, and it's going to be a really hard pop off the midfoot into the jump. Next, we have the high hurdle jumps. The reactivity of the ground is going to be very similar to the drop jumps, except now we're going to ask the athlete to actually create a lot of height in between each step, have a nice natural flow of knee raise, thigh raise before they attack back into the ground, which should have some nice transfer into some top-end sprinting and even some of the acceleration mechanics that we need. Notice how fast and hard the athlete hits the ground on each step. We're looking for midfoot strikes, and we're looking for minimal ground contact time as we get as high as possible. Guys, the next drill we're going to do is a double jump onto a plyo box. You can do this on bleachers if you don't have any boxes, but basically you're going to jump onto a box. As soon as you hit the box, you're going to get a second jump. This is very concentrically focused, so this is going to be great for those athletes that are having trouble accelerating. Notice there's an aggressive attack into the box for a second jump. We're spending as little time as possible transitioning into that second jump, but we're also creating as much force as possible, and you can see how this directly translates into your acceleration portion of your sprint. During acceleration, we tackled some resisted bounds. Another version to do bounds is with no resistance. Is going to be a lot more dynamic. There's going to be less ground contact time, and the angle is going to be a little bit more vertical than we would get on a sled, but it's still a very, very important exercise. Still going to create some ankle stiffness, and it's going to create a lot of that spring and elasticity through the joints that we want when we're sprinting. Good. All right, guys, this next drill is probably the most taxing, one of the hardest to execute drills, but one that's going to give you one of the best returns into sprinting power is a single leg bound or single leg jumps. Okay, again, you're going to try to replicate as much of the movement mechanics of a sprint as you can. You're trying to hit the ground really fast, and you're trying to cycle or pop the knee up as fast and aggressively as possible, getting down the floor. Good. Okay, guys, when we're tackling the power and force production that we need out of acceleration, we get to spend a little bit more time on the ground and really try to project the body into the air. Great way to do this is to do lunge jumps and squat jumps. We'll go over the lunge jump first. There's two variations. There's a single leg lunge jump that there's no alternating legs, and there's an alternating version as well. We'll do the alternating first. You're going to bend the knees, try to get close to 90-degree angles, and you're going to jump as high as you can, coming in and out of the ground, trying to extend as fast as possible, but also as high as possible. The second one is a squat jump, which is going to be very similar, but there's going to be no... Good. And then one more version we could do is a single leg lunge jump where there's no alternating legs, and you're basically going to go into a lunge You're still trying to get maximal hip extension and try to push off the ground as fast as possible, get as much vertical jump in as little time as you can. All right, guys, rudiment hops is an exercise that seems very, very easy at first, but there's actually a lot of complicated things going on in it. We're trying to generate spring in the knees and hips while creating stiffness in the ankles and feet. The idea is to jump without getting full extension in the ankle part of your movement. Usually when we sprint, we want to have relatively stiff ankles that doesn't give you a lot of that extra ankle stuff, because that's what provides that kickback. So we want to be able to produce force with spring without getting that spring coming off the toes. This is what the rudiment hop's going to do. The athlete's going to bend and extend, being springy off the knees and hips and being stiff in the foot. You can go multiple directions. You can go backwards with it. You can also go side to side, which we won't show you right now, but the idea is to be springy on the knees, spongy on the knees, stiff in the ankles. All right, guys, the last drill we're going to tackle in this series are pogo hops. Now, pogo hops are going to be a little bit different than rudiments in the sense that they're going to create stiffness all the way through the body, right? Stiffness at the end of the day is what we want to really produce force into the ground and not bleed energy. These pogo hops, we're going to be stiff at the ankles, we're going to be stiff at the knees and the hips. We're trying to produce as much height as possible with as little ground contact time as possible, trying to hit with the midfoot underneath the hips. And this is what a pogo is going to look like. All right, guys, one great tool we could use to develop some of the mechanical needs of upright sprinting or max velo sprinting is a curved treadmill. A treadmill that has a little bit of a curve in the front and kind of zeroes out. What happens with this treadmill is going to do two things. It's going to really promote your front side mechanics, which is what we're after when we're sprinting at top end or max speed. And it's also going to make sure that you're not overcooking the back end and pushing too far away from your body this way, so that you create that elongated back kick, because it's going to give you immediate feedback. It's going to throw you off this treadmill. So you got to find yourself a curved treadmill. It's self-propelled. Most of them are self-propelled, and you're basically going to start sprinting, really focusing on your front side mechanics, recovering underneath your hips with a high heel recovery, and attacking the front of the treadmill. The more you can attack the front of the treadmill, the more you're going to work the whip effect and hamstring pre-tension that we want when we're sprinting.